Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. How we doing?
Good. All right, microphone's working good.
Good morning. We'll get started. Charles Reed, would you mind leading us in a prayer, and then we'll get going?
Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you once again. Just thank you for your blessing yet another day. We just ask you to be here with us and help us that we can understand what's presented. We ask you to be the time that he presents it in the way that you want, that we interpret as you want. Lord, as many in our numbers that are sick, we ask you to be with them, their families and doctors, assistants. Any of lost loved ones, we ask you for their comfort. We ask this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. As you can see, we're in Galatians 5. That's where we'll pick up. Now, one of the most important lessons I learned in my career was that it was not important to be the smartest person in the room. But it was important to be able to recognize the smartest person in the room as quickly as possible. So that when the conversation went that direction and that person listened for a while and then said, here's what I think we should do, that was my cue. Hey, what she said. Or what he said. I'm going with them. But because we all have different talents and abilities. There's a class that I do with the teenagers at school, and it's on IQ. And I tell them that it's that a lie that's been perpetrated on our society is that there's a single number called IQ that defines how smart you are. And that's not true. It's never been true. It never will be true. It's just a convenient thing, and people love numbers. But there's no less than 8 different types of IQ. And depending on how you slice it, there may be even more than 8. But you can't get it below 8. And it's never ever just one. And the fact of the matter is that we are all smart in 2 or 3, maybe even more, of those 8. And we all are not quite as quick on some of the others of those 8s. Okay? And so there's no, the conversation that goes to a person is smart or smarter or not as leads us to completely incorrect conclusions. Because if you take into account all of those 8, we're all smart. And there's some areas that we all need to do some work on. Which is the best way I know to introduce what we're going to spend the next several weeks talking about in this Bible class. We're going to talk about the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians chapter 5. Now, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. So when Clark proposed this to me, I said, okay, that sounds good. We can do that. And then he hit me with this schedule of, here are the ones that you can take, and here are the ones that I can take. And I reflected back to that 8 different channels of IQ concept. And I looked at the ones that Clark had tagged for me, and I was thinking, good. I might be on the short bus and some of these. So, I say all that to beg your indulgence as we move through these, because if I stand up here and try to do a class on long-suffering or patience, then any of you who have had a 2-minute conversation with me are immediately going to say, mutter under your breath, well, what is this yahoo doing talking to us about patience? That's not one of those channels of IQ in which I feel confident.
Hey, Don, no church is perfect.
Well, thank you for that. Because what I was about to do was to say, okay, we're going to have a show of hands who feels expert at every one of those fruits of the Spirit. Please, So we'll work together on that, understanding that we're all works in progress. Dana, her name in our family is Love. That just kind of emerged when our 2 older kids were in junior high. And her interactions with the kids and their friends. And I couldn't even tell you differently. But we're going to work with this. The fruits of the Spirit. And the first one is love. I believe that all Scripture is inspired. I believe that all Scripture was given by the Spirit for our benefit. And what goes along with that is that within that inspiration, I believe the sequence was given by inspiration and was important. Because it begins with love. And the others have no value without it, as we'll see in a moment. And Paul is quick to tell the Galatians here in this letter, against which there is no law. Now, we haven't studied Galatians in a while, but for those of you that have already recalled the letter to the Christians in the region of Galatia. What was the theme in that book? What was Paul dealing with? Any takers?
Was that they were justified by faith alone?
That there's a theme in there that there were Judaizing Christians that were trying to impose the law or different aspects of legal code on New Testament Christians. And so within this, he's saying that if you demonstrate these things, there's no law against that. You're not going to find aspects of the Mosaic law or the Mosaic code telling you love is a bad thing. Joy is a bad thing. Avoid patience at all cost. No, you're not going to find that anywhere in the Mosaic code. But also, I believe there's a bit of a dual entendre there, that we've talked about the New Testament period, and Paul understands they're moving into a period of greater and greater opposition and persecution from the Roman government. And in a number of places, he goes out of his way to caution New Testament Christians to not live in such a way as to give the government a basis for making accusations against them. So my conviction is that both laws are within the context here. That you'll find nothing within the Mosaic Code for Christians who would try to impose the Mosaic Code. You'll find nothing in the Mosaic Code outlawing these things. And likewise, if we're concerned that our government is going to impose some regime of persecution against us, and they're going to try to find reasons to bring accusations to our account, practicing these things will not provide a basis for accusation for either party. So that being said, where do we start with love? Well, really, we start right here. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Now, my anxiety with this verse is that it's almost become bumper sticker wisdom, because the number of celebrities, think athletes, and I'm not outlawing, but eye black with John 3:16, or there was a guy for years that was at various athletic events, John 3:16. And please, I'm not saying people shouldn't do that. But speaking only for myself, at some point I think it was overdone and maybe lost some of its impact with the intended audience. But this verse encapsulates why we are here, why we exist. Why is, I'm an amateur, very amateur, cosmologist. I love reading and looking into why are things here? Why are there billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy? How do they interact? How does time and space bend? Those things are fascinating to me. But in the origin of them all, they are created idols. And I believe creation exists present for one reason. And that is to display the glory of God. And the most important aspect in the glory of God is the manifestation of love for creatures that would have the ability to behave in a way that would make them unlovable to most of us. Maybe I'm the odd person out there. Another group vote, informal survey. How many of you have met someone in the course of your life that you considered unlovable? Only a few of us. I'm stunned. No offense, but I don't consider that statistically significant. There are plenty of unlovable people out there. Most of us at one point or another has been unlovable. I know that's hard for you to imagine, that I may have already. But trust me when I tell you. Yes. But that God created all of this with a plan that he would send his Son, that he would suffer and die on our account, so that all of this, us, this planet, the cosmos, with this as at its center, would be a declaration and a demonstration of his love. It's not just a pithy thing to put on a bumper sticker. It is unimaginably deep. John continuing, behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called the children of God. John is known as the apostle of love. It's a recurrent theme for John. I know I've mentioned this in other classes, but it's a wonderful story about John. It's not within the New Testament. It's extra biblical. If it's one of those things that if it's not true, it really should be. But it's in the early church fathers' writings that John was, we have good evidence, the only apostle who lived to advanced age and most likely died a natural death. And he lived in Ephesus in the last part of his life, southwestern Turkey on modern day global map. And like a lot of old people, please don't be offended, I are old people. Okay. He didn't get around well towards the end of his life. He had to be helped. And he would come to the meetings of the saints, and I mean, this is John. He knew all of the apostles. He knew the Lord. And people would pepper him with all of these questions. And his response would be, just love one another. That's enough. And they would say, but you always say that. And his response would be, if you can do this, it's enough. But that's a big statement, y'all. If you can do this, if you can love one another, if we can manifest this level of love to one another, not everybody, I mean, everybody out there would be wonderful, but that's a big ask. Just with us. John is saying, if you can do that, that's enough. So we're not talking about light affection. We're not talking about fist bumps. We're talking about absolute commitment to one another. If we can do that, then that's enough. What manner of love the Father has bestowed on us. Continuing. For when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one man die, yet perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. But God demonstrates his love, his own love toward us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. What was Friday? What did Friday commemorate? June 6th. The invasion of Normandy. Young men on that beach suffered horribly. And some of them did absolutely breathtaking, heroic acts. I had I'll get short of breath. When I was in high school, I had the absolute honor of knowing a man, Colonel Don Peck, who was a young Marine officer in the Pacific in World War II. A young Marine infantry officer in World War II, when the front dropped from the landing craft and they walked out onto the sand, they had a life expectancy of less than 7 seconds. How many breaths can you take in 7 seconds? Colonel Beck survived 3 amphibious assaults in the Pacific. He survived Korea. He survived Vietnam. And as a teenager, when you think you're bulletproof and going to live forever, I had the benefit of Colonel Beck first-hand accounts of what young Marines did for one another. I'll do this so you can go home. And it was just stunning what they were willing to do for each other. Fortunately, and I'm not begging for the opportunity, fortunately, it's rare that we get asked to sacrifice that way. But someone did that for us. God demonstrates His own love towards us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I read at one time an entire chapter in a book about just the beginning of this verse. In due time, Christ died for the ungodly. And there's an entire chapter in this book about in due time, which I'm no scholar, but the author of the book was a scholar. And what he said was, in due time would be rendered also at the right time. At the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. So why was 33 AD? Why was that the right time? Why not today when we have mass communication? It would be captured on, immediately in real time. The level of detail in the documentation of things that he did and said would be so different. But if it wasn't for him, what would the last 2,000 years have looked like? How different would they have been? Would we have ever emerged from the Dark Ages? I don't know. Fair question. But at the right time, He came. And while we were still sinners, He loved us enough to do this. And then we're left finally with this statement. If you love me, keep my commandments.
I think that love has a multitude of faults.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can look beyond the person's fault, because you don't look at so much of what they do. You look at them as and knowing the weakness of myself,
Mm-hmm.
I can forgive. I'm not telling you that it's easy, because
And said, you have to forgive them. Don't let that be the thing that keeps you out of heaven. She said, for your own sake, you have to forgive them. And I needed to hear those words. I needed to hear it couched exactly like that. And it was fortunate for me that I had a person close to me that cared enough about me, that I trusted enough, that they could look me in the eye and put it in those stark terms. It requires a measure of humility, right? So we have to love one another. How can we love God if we can't love people that we can see here? We're challenged with that, right, in the New Testament. How can you even say that you love God if you can't behave in such a manner to the people around you that you love them? They're right there. We would be remiss. Let's turn to 1 Corinthians 13. Obviously, if you're going to talk about love in a New Testament framework, you have to go there. And this is really broken down into about 3 chunks, if you will. The first chunk, that's a highly mysteries and all knowledge. And though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Paul is writing this in a period, in a day, when spiritual gifts were still there in the vicinity. He said, you can exercise spiritual gifts, but if you don't have love, they're of no value to you. You can have knowledge, faith. You can be brilliantly educated in the greatest seminaries of our day, with multiple doctorates of divinity, theology, whatever. Speak original Greek and Hebrew fluently as you were born to. But if you're just some arrogant brainiac, it profits you nothing. I hope none of us will be called to suffer martyrdom for the faith. It's not an outrageous thought. It's not completely unimaginable. There are people in our society who would lean that direction for us. But if we do, if we find ourselves in that position, even if my body is offered to be burned for the sake of Jesus, if I do it without love, Paul says, so no value. That's a pretty high bar, y'all. He goes on, love suffers long and is kind, does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love is not self-centered. It's not a me thing. We've all, at one point or another, most likely, had sat through a lesson profitably. I don't mean this negatively. Where you talk about the three types of love that are talked about in the New Testament, right? You have eros, which is a romantic love. What's the next one moving up?
Phileo.
Phileo, which is stunning to me. Have you ever been to Philadelphia, Eric? The city of brotherly love. Do you get that when you're walking around the streets of Philadelphia? Oh my goodness. If you rate Philadelphia, Boston, New York, where you're going to get the most rudeness? Yes. New York, Boston, Philadelphia. But phileo, brotherly love. So then agape is the top one. What is agape? What kind of love is that?
Selfless.
Selfless. And that's what we're called to. And that's a hard thing. Because the way we're made, and when I say that, I'm not saying it's God's fault. It's not my fault. I'm just saying it's part of the design specs. That there's always a part of our brain that has a what about me component. Now, I'm surveying the class. What relationship, what earthly relationship do you get to observe to some degree or with some frequency that comes the closest to the selfless aspect of love?
My marriage.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly what I was looking for. Mothers. Mothers are special. And I'm not saying that to be patronizing. I mean that exactly. Dana has done stuff for our kids that I stood back and said, good thing for them that you're around. It's not that I don't love our kids. But it's a different level, right? It's a different level. My brother lost his hearing at 3, became completely deaf, is deaf to this day. This afternoon, actually, in Amarillo, Texas, he's being inducted into the Texas Panhandle Sports Hall of Fame for the levels of success that he enjoyed within high school athletics as a coach. He's phenomenally successful. He owes all of that, without reservation, all of that, to one person. that completely selflessly gave up her own dreams, hopes and dreams and ambitions and invested them in him. I don't know what his remarks will be at the induction today. But if he doesn't say, I wouldn't be here without Shirley Tankersley, then he has missed the boat. But I expect him to say that. I expect him to say that. I'm going to hit you with a bit of trivia here, because it's within this one here that we just talked about, within this chunk, that I think a lot of us struggle with from time to time. How many of you have heard that there's a German term, Schadenfreude? Schadenfreude. There's no word for it in English. But it is the unseemly enjoyment you get from the discomfort or misfortune of another person. A few years ago, Alabama played Notre Dame in the national championship game. How'd that turn out? Okay. Kim says, we won. We, us. True confessions. I don't know if I enjoyed Alabama winning more or Notre Dame losing. That's because I was raised right. But it was a bit of Schadenfreude. I don't want those people to have a good day. I don't need to have a great day as long as they have a bad day. How many of us have been guilty of Schadenfreude? The unseemly enjoyment that we get from another person's misfortune. That's not exactly on the list here. But how difficult is it to does not rejoice in iniquity? That's tough, y'all. Right here in this room, we have people that support different schools within this same state. Is there ever a bit of Schadenfreude experience there? I'm not invested in that one, so it's easy for me to throw rocks at it. When I was a kid, I went to a boys' club in Emerald, Texas called Maverick Club. Middle-class kids and upper-class kids went to the YMCA in Emerald. A different class of kids went to the Maverick Club. I think back then annual dues might have been $7 or $8. But if you could afford $7 or $8 and your family couldn't, you could work it off. Mr. Dykman would make sure that no one was turned away. But what was non-negotiable was you had to recite from Mr. Dykman a couple of things. You had to memorize them, and you had to give them to Mr. Dykman from memory. First was Proverbs 22:6. What does that say? Bring up a child in the way that he should grow, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's when I had to learn that verse. I had to stand in front of Mr. Dykman and tell him that. And I also had to tell him this. Our motto, I say our because you never quit being a Maverick. God first, family second, country third, other fellow fourth, me last. It was drilled into us. You don't cut in line. You go to the back door. If there's one thing left, take a half step back and let that guy come say. That this was critical. And as young boys, most of us from parts of town that maybe people didn't get the best of first-hand parenting. That's about the most polite way I can put it. This was important. Then we go on. Love never fails. But whether there be prophecy, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, that which is in part shall be done away with. Love never fails. Love will never end. And I don't mean this as an academic sort of There's a reason. And earlier, I talked about something that gives you the answer to this. Why will love never fail? Why will love never go away? Why does the universe exist? Because God loves us. When does God go away? God is eternal. So if God is the author and the source of love, when we're all gone and other people have taken our place, during the latter part of the school year, I made some young girls cry, and I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to be mean. I was talking to them, and I said, you guys are nearer the beginning of your life than the end. Short of some tragic accident or unforeseen catastrophe, which I wouldn't wish on any of you, you're nearer the beginning of your life and you have a long way to go. I said, I'm nearer the end of my life than the beginning. And that's when a lot of the tears started. I said, excuse me, I need to do that. That was, my mistake. I said, but that's just the way things are. That we were never meant to be here permanently. We were never intended to be permanent residents of this sphere. We were always meant to just be passing through. Because home is somewhere else. And we go to that home knowing love will never fail. Love will never fail for one reason. Because God is the author of love, and God is eternal. So where do we end with this topic? John 13. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another. As I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. The people outside our body, this body of Christians, this church, this collection of people who have made a commitment to the Lord, the people outside of that, they have a right to look at us with a critical eye. They have a right to view us and ask themselves the question, do we meet this standard? Because if we don't meet this standard, why should they want to be partners? Why would they want to be known as a member of this group of people if we fail to do that? By this all will know that you are my disciples. So, what's the litmus test for us for discipleship? That we love one another. Because somebody's watching, right? And they have a right to watch. They have a right to look and evaluate that. And if they have a right to look and evaluate that, then we have the obligation, we have, what's the third word in this verse? Commandment. Is a commandment a suggestion? Those of you that are parents, when you give a commandment, is that, hey, if you have time and you feel like it, this is something you might want to consider doing? No. I mentioned Shirley Tankersley earlier. She understood commandment. And she made sure that my sister and brother and I understood commandment in ways not altogether fashionable in today's parenting expectations. Okay? But this is what we're called to do. Now, we're all different people. Does the way Jamie loved people here have to look like the way that Carl loves people here? No, they're different people. It doesn't have to look the same. But the expectation doesn't change, right? We all have ways that we manifest love for one another. I'm not expected to meet Nedra's bar and profile for love. Because she has a different capacity than I do. Probably a whole lot more. But I am expected to meet my capacity. Whatever that capacity is. And it's not a philosophical expectation. I don't get to sit home and think great thoughts about loving her. Not one of you care if I think great thoughts about loving the brethren. What matters is what I do. That's where we're at. Comments, questions, what about that?
I'm glad you ended it with action, because love is action.
Here we go. Yeah. It's observable. And I'm not given a choice, right? Okay, thank you very much.
It's good. I go on the 18th. Hopefully they'll release me. We get back.